All right, so I am Bob Barnett. I'm an enterprise account executive for Intensi. Super excited to be here today. As with most people, this is a new format for me. I think it's so cool what Safety Night's doing, bringing us all together from really across the globe for us to talk safety and for me to be a part of this. I'm just really thrilled to share our vision about how AI can help EHS professionals, and again, in a good way. This is nothing to be scared of. This is something to embrace, and I hope that comes across today. I know we have time. I get really excited and passionate about this topic, so I know I'm going to use up my 20 minutes, but we do have an intensive room down below that I would like to hang out in after. I will be there to answer questions, to chat, whatever. Um, if you're new to this platform like me, all you got to do is pick out your little icon, drag it down to the intensive room, and you should be able to join. Come up and talk to me, and we'll have a live chat. If that doesn't work, you can always throw it in the chat, and we'll answer questions. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. One sec. All right, on the agenda today, really there's just two areas I'm going to focus on. The first one is why AI matters. Why is it important at this time um, as it pertains to safety? What's changing beyond the plateau? So we're going to talk about the safety plateau, what that means, and then how AI can get us off of that plateau. I put an asterisk down there. I don't think we're going to have time to tackle the future of AI and safety, but if we do, I'll touch on what you can expect in the future, what AI is going to look like as it pertains to safety over the next maybe 2 to 3 years. But that's certainly something that we can continue the conversation down below if I don't get to, which I don't think I will. All right. It would not be a safety nights presentation without a meme, right? One of the things that I love about safety nights is their strong meme game on LinkedIn. It always keeps me entertained. So I thought I would throw one in here. But the truth of the matter is, as Miriam mentioned before OSHA, this really kind of represents how safety was seen for a lot of companies. They talked a lot about safety, but maybe the execution wasn't really there, right? They didn't have the tools, they didn't have the guidance that they needed to make significant change. When I talk about the safety plateau, I think it's important for us to understand where we are today and how we got there, and then what AI can do to get us off of that plateau. So when we look at this, oops, I've got a very sensitive mouse, so every time I touch it, it changes the screen. I apologize. So let's look at this. These are work-related injury and illness rates per 100 for full-time employees starting in 1973 to 2023. So, as Miriam just taught us back just a couple of minutes ago, OSHA was started in 1971. So you can see the strong correlation here of what has happened. Workplaces were not the safest place back in the 60s, back in the 70s. A lot of things changed. OSHA came along, and we really started to emphasize safety. And we should be proud of this. Look at the progress that we've made. We've just really driven down these injury rates, and we've done that through a lot of processes, things like JSAs, hazard IDs, inspections, BBOs, a lot of manual processes. While doing that, that changed the culture. Our culture really started to focus more on safety. Employees got more involved, and we really saw a pretty big decline in the injury rates. But then if we look here at somewhere around 2010, 2012, we'll see that that's kind of plateaued, right? The rates have dropped slightly, but we're not seeing this big dramatic shift. Why is that? Well, we've got all these policies in place, we've got the procedures in place. Now companies are very focused on having a safety culture, but there's really not a lot more that we can do. We can always get better, of course, but we got to the point where we were kind of at a standstill. Um, if we look at the reality of the situation, every 7 seconds, there's a workplace injury. So even though we've made all of this progress, which again, we should be thrilled about, there's still work to be done here, right? When Miriam and Andy were talking about some of those incidents, mortality, a lot of different SIFs, all of that just really rings true to that. Hey, even though we've made progress, we still got a little bit more to do. But the good news is we now have tools that we didn't have before. We now have AI, we have computer vision. And that's what I want to focus on today and show you what that looks like and really how this can be a positive uh, influence in your organization. So, when we talk about these new tools and we talk about this plateau, how are we going to get off this plateau? How are we going to drive down these incident rates? Well, that's where computer vision and AI is coming into play. This new technology works through your current camera infrastructure to identify EHS risks, hazards, operational inefficiencies 24/7. So, this is giving you insights that you normally wouldn't have. Because of that, you're able to make these data-driven decisions that you've never had before. So, let's look at this first example here. You've got this guy climbing up on top of this rack here. This is going to record that. You're going to have a snippet of it, but this is something you probably wouldn't have seen unless you just happen to be on site. I'm sure that there's some policy or procedure in place where this isn't supposed to happen, but unless you were just standing there, doing some sort of manual observation, then you wouldn't know this is happening. So, is this just a one off thing or is this something happening every day? Now you'll know. You'll have that data to know whether you need to act on this. The second example, this is a very, very common one. Um, Vehicle pedestrian interactions. If you work in any sort of warehousing, manufacturing, distribution facility, you've got vehicles, you got forklifts moving all over the place, right? Well, again, if there hasn't been some sort of injury turned in, or if there hasn't been a near miss turned in, you may not know, you probably won't know um, the risk that's happening right there under your nose. That's what these cameras and these models are designed to do. Feed you these insights again so you can make data driven decisions. So every time this happens in your facility, you can log into a platform, say Monday morning, Friday afternoon, and you'll have all that data there to say, you know what, I thought we were doing great on forklift safety. Well, we had 40 near misses in our facility last week that I didn't know about. Now the conversation turns from being reactive, having to wait until someone's hurt, to proactive, where you can, do some additional training, maybe make a pedestrian walkway or widen a forklift path, but take those proactive steps to engineer that risk out before it ever happens. This last one I think is also a pretty interesting example. The fancy term here, you'll see static delimitation pop up on the screen, but all that means is that this employee is up here where he's not supposed to be, right? Certainly don't want this happening. So that would be an alert that would tell you, hey, this is happening. It would be a data point. You would know how often it's happening. But there's other things to gain from this. So why did this employee have to jump up here, right? Does maintenance need to be performed on these rollers? Are they broken? Are they broken? Is something not, right with this load here? Why is it? Do we need to cut that in half? What do we need to do to eliminate this risk where the employee doesn't feel like they have to jump up on rollers and put their shoulder into it, right? So lots of insights that you can gain from these cameras. I also want to point out just, as we're providing these insights to you, we really want to change the narrative. So think how much easier, if you're an EHS professional, think how much easier your job would be if you had visibility into all of these risks happening to you with a simple dashboard. How much better would you sleep at night knowing exactly where your risks are, how to analyze them, what corrective actions to make, and once you set a corrective action in place, you have immediate feedback on whether it's working or not. You don't have to go out there, try to find time to manually observe to make sure that, whatever you put in place was having the effect it needed to. One of the key areas here, and one of the things that gets me the most excited when I talk to EHS leaders, when they're presenting to their bosses or when they're presenting to leadership, the our customers, the conversation has turned. So they're not just focusing on, they don't go into a conversation just focusing on injuries that have occurred, what their TRIR is, lost time, all these negatives that they normally have to present to their boss. They're now able to go in there and talk about the accidents they prevented, the risk that they've decreased through proactive measures using these leading indicators. So now the whole conversation's changed. They go into leadership, they're able to pull up the dashboard and say, hey, we had a risk score of X. Because of these insights, we were able to drive that down, 20% over the last quarter. Totally different conversation than having to focus just on injuries that have already occurred. And when I talk to these professionals, these EHS leaders, these directors, it's such a refreshing conversation, and they see it too. They tell us, how it's really just changed the culture and the way that they view safety within their organization. Super exciting stuff. So let me give you just a simple example. All right, over here, this is an actual customer of ours. I'm not going to say who, but they allowed us to use this example, and this was a big deal for them. So they had our system put up. Over here on the right, you're going to see these employees just stroll across the gantry here. Well, to them, this didn't seem like a big deal. It just became habit over time. And then, someone did it once, and then people started following. Well, this became kind of a shortcut for several employees there. Well, the EHS team came across, they said, whoa, this is actually a pretty serious thing. We could have serious injury here. And they now had the insight to take action. All they had to do was post some signage. They held a little toolbox talk, and then they put this low cost barrier here. And after doing that, again, they have these cameras, they have these alerts. So they were able to watch their alerts go from this happening multiple times a day to zero. They were able to eliminate the risk completely, and they didn't even know it was happening a week before. That's the power of computer vision AI. This is just one example, but I always get so excited when I hear this stuff because they were thrilled. They were like, this is a risk we didn't even know about. Until something happened, we probably wouldn't have ever known about that because it was in a corner of our facility that, to be quite honest, they didn't pay a whole lot of attention to. So what are some common things that these models look for? Here's a list of just a few of them. Now, when you talk about computer vision AI, that can be security, it can be operational efficiency. We are solely in the space of EHS. Safety Nights is focused on EHS. So that's what I wanted to highlight here, just some of these models. So really the obvious ones are PPE. All sorts of PPE can be detected if an employee is or isn't wearing them. We've got all these different area controls here, but some of the big ones that it's always interesting to me is housekeeping. When I go on site, I ask, we're always analyzing like the dangerous material or dangerous machinery that's there and analyzing the risk around them. And then I ask, hey, what are your last couple incidents? It never fails. There's always a slip, trip, or a fall. Always. And that speaks to the housekeeping. So AI can detect things like spills, leakages. If a box is left unattended, for example, it's able to alert a maintenance supervisor. Yes, OSHA's #1 offense. Thank you, Cindy. She just put that in the chat. Unattended objects. So we can alert a maintenance supervisor via text or email to go take care of that immediately, clean up the spill, move the box, whatever we need to do. So again, just a way to be proactive and really change the narrative around keeping employees safe. Ergonomics is another area where AI really shines. Now, I'm just going to touch on this. If anyone's implemented an ergonomics program, that it can be pretty frustrating. Ergonomics is a science. It's not an exact science. Everybody's a little bit different. It's very hard to go out and do a manual assessment, spend time on that, and then scale it across an organization. Computer vision does the assessments for you. Reba and Rula assessments 24/7 all across your facility, so you know where the problem areas are and you know how to attack those. Beyond detection, real-time action, what are we talking about there? So an alert can be a couple of things. One, you can have an alert and it just goes to a dashboard that allows you to go in and analyze data as a data point. But then you have proactive alerts. So when we say beyond detection, there's really two types of alerts. You have one for supervisors. So think of the example I just used. There's a spill or a box that was left unattended. You could actually have that alert sit to a supervisor for immediate action. Or if there's a man down, someone got hit. On the employee side, there's proactive alerts as far as things like machine shutoffs. So if an employee crosses a barrier, they don't have the correct PPE on, we can actually shut that machine off. Or if there's supposed to be, two people in an area, you've got one performing a duty and a spotter, and there's only one, we can shut that machine off. Here is an example of a smart device. So we've got this forklift coming down.
This area. Please do not enter.
You see this cart enter right here. And I don't know if you can hear this playing in the background, but we have a speaker saying, please do not enter this area. Please do not enter this area. So again, another way to provide that data to employees in real time to help prevent injuries before they happen. I believe I'm coming up on time here. There is one thing I want to touch on before I jump into my room. Privacy and security. I know this is a big one. We've designed our program where we do not want this to be a punitive tool. We don't want Big Brother watching. Cameras are already in your facility. Cameras are already in the facility. So you know they're there, but we have certain things that we do to help employees feel more comfortable. The first one is face blurring. That is standard. We will not unblur the faces. So in every episode, in every instance, all faces will be blurred at minimum. Then we have 3D anonymization and full ghosting. We can even eliminate the timestamp down here as well. So I want you to know that we do take privacy very seriously. This is not a punitive tool. This is a tool to work with your leadership to really identify proactively those leading indicators and ultimately keep your employees safe. I think I'm up against the clock here, so I will wrap up for questions and jump in my room.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob. That was an AI opener. So now that we all know that AI can be a great tool in our tool belts and how Intensai can make our jobs a little easier, if anyone has any additional questions for Bob, Intensai is graciously hosting the discussion room AI tactics for EHS. So make sure to head on over there if you have any questions or just want to have a deeper conversation regarding AI. He's only there for a few hours, so please make sure to check the hours by clicking on the board outside of Intensai's room. So I want to add that